Aliens Explored is a weekly podcast exploring famous and obscure cases of UFO sightings, alien abductions and other strange events from both a believing and a skeptical perspective whilst keeping an open mind. I'm Stu Jackson, a professional actor and amateur ufologist with a particular interest in the crop circle phenomenon. I'll be debating that otherworldly visitations are real. The truth is out there.
And I'm Neil Kelly. I'm a professional actor as well and used to work for the military as an intelligence analyst. I'll be arguing from a more doubtful point of view. I mean, it's all a bit far-fetched, isn't it?
Merry Christmas, everybody!
Merry Christmas!
And happy holidays to you all.
And a cool Yule for those of that persuasion, the pagan persuasion.
Cool Yule, happy Kwanzaa, happy Hanukkah, happy holidays for everyone out there. We're here, it's Christmas Day.
Christmas Day. Bonne Noël.
Are you drunk yet, Neil?
Frohe Weihnachten. Prettige Kerstdagen. Hoeve Jula.
Week Świąt. Joyeux Noël. What else can we do? We know all this
Feliz
stuff.
Navidad. We're about to have some Spanish.
Feliz Navidad. As actors, we often get to play seasonal characters from this time of year, so we know how to say Merry Christmas in lots of different languages. In fact, that's how we met, isn't it, Neil?
We did, yes. Father Christmas.
Yes.
Doing a horrible Father Christmas job. We were bonded by adversity in the face of a shitty, sitting in the mud of forest.
No, we're not going to name names.
Oh, sorry. Yes, cut that bit.
I'll put a bleep over it. Don't worry.
Joined in adversity, sitting in the muddy hellhole in a forest in the middle of winter.
You're giving away too many details again.
But a great experience for the family. I can't knock it.
I'll bleep which county that is as well. That's 2 bleeps already. Well, this is a very special Christmas episode that we are putting out here today. So, I mean, I'm saying to know, are you drunk yet? It's Christmas Day. Of course, for us, we are a couple of weeks away because we're pre-recording this, aren't we?
We are, yes. Although we both have green screens with Christmassy scenes behind us because that's how we're earning a living at the moment.
We're doing an online service at the moment, so yes, but hopefully for you all listening, you've all had an amazing day with everyone you can see at the moment, and we're here to discuss a really interesting one. So regardless of what your religious what's the word I'm looking for here? Persuasion, that's the word. Regardless of what your religious persuasion might be, we're here to discuss the concept that's been put forward as to whether or not Jesus may have been an extraterrestrial. And you can't get much more Christmassy than that,
You can't get much more Christmassy than that. Let me just say, I mean, we know that that many of our listeners are based in America. Have you been to the United States, Stu?
I haven't.
One thing I can tell you, one thing that really strikes me as a European visiting the United States is how much more religious they are, how much larger Jesus Christ looms in their lives than people in Europe. That it's not uncommon everywhere you go to see big billboards up just randomly everywhere, just saying things like praise the Lord, praise Jesus, God bless, all this kind of thing.
Jesus saves.
You're going to make a joke here.
Not on my income, it wouldn't.
Outside the bank. But they have things. They have these. We don't have, for instance, tele-evangelists in this country. Or in Europe, certainly not with their own TV stations, certainly not making mega bucks out of their congregations. They're not flying around in private jets or anything like that. I mean, there might be a couple of digital radio stations that have a sort of Christian bent or an Islamic bent, but nothing like you get in the States with televangelists. And also, we don't have mega churches. On busy times like Christmas and Easter, our church congregations are measured in dozens rather than hundreds or thousands. So religion can be a sensitive subject in America. That's kind of what I'm getting at. And I also need to say that I'm not religious. So I will tread with care. We don't want to lose our listeners, do we, just by being insensitive? So
well, no, absolutely, and yeah, I think that's a very good point. This is being done with the greatest of respect to anyone's beliefs. We don't claim to have answers. I mean, neither of us are particularly religious people. I like to think I'm a spiritual person, but I'm not a religious person. So that's very much the case. But greatest of respect to anybody out there who does believe. And hopefully nothing we're going to say is going to tread on that. But, if it does...
Yeah, hopefully most of our listeners, they are consumed with their interest in UFOs, in alien encounters, and are open to the possibility that things that are recorded could be evident, and extraterrestrial or paranormal phenomena that are recorded could be evidence of an alien visit. And of course, the story of Jesus Christ, the greatest story ever told, is full of things which could be UFO sightings, starting with the bright star above the manger.
Oh yes, absolutely. I like how you're launching straight into that. So it's got to be mentioned when we first discussed the idea of doing this, I thought this would be a nice little, I hate to say it, almost humorous sort of, not silly, but I didn't take this concept that seriously. My goodness, though. I mean, so some people may have heard of the Arthurian Society, which is from some years ago now, but a chap claimed to have received a message from some aliens on Venus saying that Jesus was an alien, and he started a religion based on this, and it's not taken too seriously by serious ufologists. But what I've discovered, when you scratch the surface of it, actually I think there's far more credence to this than what I ever imagined.
Okay.
I've had quite an education doing this. Quite a surprising one.
Okay, I'm going to go with you on this because, I mean, for instance, I'm not a believer. I don't believe the Jesus story. So it's the whole thing's fiction to me. So all these whatever alien encounters there are in the Jesus story, they're as fictional as Jesus, to me. Well,
I've always believed that there was a person by the name of Jesus or Jesus or someone at least that the stories were based upon. I've always accepted that there was a genuine person at the root of it all. Spreading a good word, spreading words of love and peace, and ultimately being sacrificed for that.
I'm inclined towards the belief that this is an amalgamation of stories about several people, all sort of moulded into the legend of one person. A bit like Robin Hood in our country. There were outlaws in Nottingham, in Sherwood Forest. But they created this legendary character, probably centuries after the event. But it's that kind of thing. There would have been people preaching what were seen as heresies or threats to the state in those times. Hundreds of years later, when the Gospels were written, that could have all just been moved into one person. But Christianity also borrows from a lot of other religions, doesn't it? A lot of older religions.
Well, I think it's generally accepted that it developed from the offshoot of the Egyptian So Tutankhamun's father, Akhenaten, because Tutankhamun was originally Tutankhaten. Akhenaten basically went away from the multi-theistic, polytheistic beliefs, and believed in one sun god originally. He basically left society and started his own civilization. And it's generally believed that that's one of the major origins of Christianity. Tutankhamun's father. But yeah, I can see that whole point. It's an amalgam of different people, different stories coming together, and yeah, I can see that. But let's look at the story itself then. So you mentioned the star, but let's go back a little bit before that, where the story of Mary being visited by an angel and being impregnated.
Well, if you're an alien race and you want to start establishing your race on another planet, what better way than to start impregnating the women of that planet, and so they would give birth to creatures that are more like you. Especially if your whatever your mix is more dominant, that whatever she gives birth to is going to be more like you than like her human self.
Indeed, and let's look at the angels of the Bible. So we've got this picture now of them having halos and wings, but actually there's no mention of this whatsoever in the Bible. It's something that came over 1,000 years later with the paintings. I think in the Renaissance, they talk about angels ascending. They talk about them going up into the heavens. No mention of them having wings. No mention of them having halos. They are described as being beings of light, however.
Yeah, because I can imagine it's more a glow around their heads rather than actually a circular light above their head. But also the wings. I mean, certainly now that we live in the age of flight, since the 18th, 19th centuries, it's certainly been pointed out that there's no way they could fly with those wings if they were the weight of a human being.
Oh no!
There's no way they'd be able to actually get airborne. So there's obviously magic involved, so they don't need the wings. If they fly, it's by some other means. Maybe the wings are just for guidance. But
that's it. But like I say, the Bible doesn't mention wings anyway, so that's definitely a human invention. I don't think there's any question.
But they could have had something which assisted flight, couldn't they?
Well, why not a craft? It talks about them ascending. It talks about them going into the heavens. It doesn't say how. There is one description, I forget where in the Bible, where it talks about an angel coming to earth on a flaming shield. Now think about a UFO
re-entering the atmosphere.
Yeah. Why not on a flaming shield? Well, how do you recognise a disc-shaped thing? And especially with the Romans, they had round shields.
And they're not too specific about. Was he sat on it? Was he sat in it? Was he riding it like a surfboard?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's how you'd ride a shield, wouldn't you?
No, just came in on a flaming shield. That could easily describe a saucer-shaped craft, but from my money.
Shields were round in Roman times, weren't they?
Indeed. But beings of light, that's one that gets me wondering, where we talk about UFO encounters and we talk about orbs, we talk about basically balls of plasma. Sounds like a being of light to me. Yes. So there's this idea that Jesus could have been perhaps a hybrid alien, where a woman has been impregnated. You've got the North Star then, and yes, that screams UFO to me.
So where was the star? Was it in the north or was it in the east?
Well, there's a very good question. Well, you've got the three wise men following the star, and they're Eastern men. They're magi, which are of Eastern origin, and they followed a star. Now, does that mean they just headed in the direction of the star? But it's the North Star, so they would have gone north.
Well, in the book of Matthew, I think it's, if I've got this right, they were sent by Herod, weren't they? And to deliver these gifts and then to report back to Herod. But they didn't trust Herod. They thought, Herod's going to do us in as soon as we get back. So they kind of slipped out the back way. They made their escape by another route. They definitely they were emissaries of Herod.
Gospel of Matthew, here you are, states, lo, the star which they saw in the east. So it wasn't which they saw in the east, went before them till it came over and stood where the young child was. So that sounds like a UFO that's basically led them right up to the actual child itself.
And this would have been people who would have had no concept of the vastness of the heavens. They would have regarded stars as fairy lights in the sky. And one of them's come down from, they would have measured it in maybe yards or miles or whatever, but they wouldn't have understood that these stars are millions, billions of light years away. So when they see a bright light come down from the sky, it's a star just coming down.
Well, you say that, but actually the Magi, I think it's generally understood, would have been, possibly amongst other things, astronomers.
Would they?
So they would have understood, planets and stars. That was fairly common knowledge around that time.
But it was still a commonly held belief until the Middle Ages that the Earth was the centre of the universe and the sun revolved around the Earth along with the moon. I mean, Galileo was imprisoned by it was Galileo, wasn't it? He was imprisoned by the Inquisition for suggesting otherwise.
Well, yes, and even though we now know that the Earth is, not spherical, it's actually an oblate spheroid, but essentially round, you still get this sudden rise in flat earthers today. So knowledge and beliefs going retrograde is not an uncommon thing.
No.
But yeah, so there's this possibility with the star. Let's move a little bit further into the story of Jesus then. So there's the miracles that he performs.
Yeah. Sorry, there's one of these miracles in particular that's burning on my mind, is the raising of the dead, which he did for himself at the end, but also in between time he raised Lazarus from the dead. And this is straight out of Plan 9 from Outer Space, isn't it? It's our plan. We will raise the dead to create a zombie horde to overthrow the humans before we invade. But be that as it may, it's just something I've always wondered. That for me, the Lazarus story lacks certain detail. If any listeners have an idea of what the answer to this is, what happened to Lazarus afterwards, after he'd been raised from the dead? Did he just sort of sit around coughing for a couple of days and then die again? Or is he still alive now? What happened to Lazarus? That's what
I think that's one of the great mysteries of life, certainly of the story. But I don't think we need to look as far as science fiction. I think we look at modern day events and technology. What if he wasn't actually dead? What if he was in a coma and Jesus had some medical science that was able to revive him? We have science today that can bring people back from the dead. People can die, be dead for minutes and still be brought back to life.
Yeah.
You talk about things like the laying on of the hands. Well, how would people 2,000 years ago have identified giving someone an injection? would that be seen as just touching them, healing them with a touch? Curing of blindness, all these things are things that we can do today.
Yes.
Walking on water is a little bit more of a complex one, but then when you think about water skiers, I don't know. That one's a bit harder for me to explain. Turning water into wine, sort of transmutation, is a form of alchemy, I suppose. I
can turn water into wine, but it just takes a few weeks. I don't need a lot of yeast and sugar and grapes.
I can turn wine into a form of water. But the point is, to a technologically advanced race, these things are no longer sort of miraculous, strange things. They are, some of the miracles that Jesus performed are now common everyday things to us, let alone a technologically advanced race. So I can definitely see some aspects there.
But I can also see how that was a story that just got distorted in the retelling that Jesus did something, and Chinese whispers, it eventually got to, he raised someone from the dead.
Indeed.
My money would be on something more like that it was a tale just in the retelling, just changed and changed and changed until it became this.
Possibly, but then how would a coma be interpreted back then? Would it be seen as death?
I don't know. I've no idea how well they could look for vital signs or anything like that someone was actually still alive but just couldn't wake up. Or
well, indeed, and without medical intervention, most likely comas would have ended in death anyway.
Yeah.
So would there be that much of a difference?
They would know if someone was just unconscious. They would have had to deal with unconscious people before, wouldn't they? Someone who's been knocked on the head, or that can't have been unknown to them.
Indeed. There's also, now this is quite an interesting one. There's an Egyptian text that's currently in an American museum. Unfortunately, I don't know which one, that suggests that Jesus might have been a shapeshifter of some description, which is a relatively common reoccurrence in UFO. I want to say mythology, that's not the right word, but certainly in UFO culture, that's a better word. It says, "How shall we arrest him? For he does not have a single shape, but his appearance changes. Sometimes he is ruddy, sometimes he is white, sometimes he is red, sometimes he is wheat-coloured, sometimes he is pallid like ascetics, sometimes he is a youth, sometimes an old man." That's a shape changer right there.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
which book is that from?
It's not from a book, it's from an Egyptian text.
Oh, okay.
Apparently. So that's quite an interesting one. Jesus himself said something, though, in the book of John, John 18:23, which could be interpreted as him claiming to be an alien. He states, "And he was saying to them, 'You are from below, I am from above. You are of this world, I am not of this world.'" So that, if you accept the Gospels as gospel, is a direct quote from Jesus saying he is not of this world, that he is an alien.
Well, that, as it would have been taken in those days, he's in heaven, which is up in the sky. I mean, even into the 18th century, I think when the Montgolfier brothers made flight possible, when they made their first balloon flights in the 1700s, that people were concerned that they would they would disturb God in his heaven by going up into the sky. That it's just up there above the clouds. And but then eventually, when obviously there was no evidence of a heavenly paradise up there, they kind of had to change the story about where heaven is.
Well, that's an interesting point in of itself, is where does this concept that heaven is up in the sky somewhere, which is so prevalent in so many religions, comes back to this whole ancient alien theory, that aliens came down in ancient times and were perceived as gods. Upwards, that's the home of the gods. That's where they live.
I'm surprised they don't have more reverence then for birds, because obviously birds, these creatures which can fly. These birds can fly up to heaven, and they've got wings like angels have. So that's how they get there. So these creatures are maybe emissaries from heaven. Why are we keeping them in cages or eating them?
It's quite possible that some do. And then you've got, you mentioned earlier about Jesus's return from the dead, his resurrection.
Yeah. Now, can I just get the chronology of his execution right? That, as I understand it, what we're talking about is a botched execution. That he was put up on the cross on the Friday, which is just Shabbat. The Sabbath starts. The Jewish Sabbath starts on the Friday evening until sundown on Saturday. So they nailed him to this cross, along with a couple of other ne'er-do-wells. And he was nailed up there to die a slow death. So yes. he was meant to, he'd probably last a few days up there before the life expired out of him. However, a centurion intervened, played by John Wayne in the 1966 film The Greatest Story Ever Told, and threw a spear into Jesus' side to put him out of his misery, and killed him prematurely. And so they all stood around thinking, well, nice one, centurion. We've made no plans to bury him because we didn't expect him to be dead. We can't have a funeral on the Sabbath. We can't pick up tools because that's forbidden. So we can't. Normally, someone's been executed or died anyway. In the Jewish culture and Middle Eastern cultures, you get them in the ground the next day. Funerals happen. If you die in Israel or any Middle Eastern country, even in Ireland, they bury you. The funeral's the next day. They hold the wake that night, and the funeral. They're thinking, oh, great. So we can't bury him until Sunday because it's the Sabbath. We can't do anything. So that's why they didn't bury Jesus when he was supposedly dead. They put him in this. Let's just put him in this handy nearby grotto and roll a big rock in front of the door so no one can nick the body. That's what I understand what's happened. That's why Jesus wasn't buried. And then when they came back on the Sunday, the body had gone. Oh shit! Yeah, we put this big boulder there, so this couldn't happen, and bloody hell, obviously wasn't heavy enough.
Well, there's that. Now I think part of the thing that adds to the confusion is that in the Bible itself there are different versions of the resurrection. That it contradicts itself basically. So
there are some inconsistencies in that book.
There are a number of inconsistencies in the Bible, it's got to be said. But the basics of that story, he was killed whilst on the cross. He was put into a cave with a stone in front of it, and 3 days later he was gone. Let's say, yes, there was a spear put into it. Let's say someone put a spear where his heart would be. What if he was an extraterrestrial? Isn't it reasonable that his heart would have actually have been in a different place, and that what would appear to be a fatal wound on a human could actually have been non-fatal to him?
Yeah. But that also makes a mockery of the idea that he died on the cross for us, because well, actually he didn't die, and he wouldn't have died because he had a completely different metabolism, and things that would kill you or I wouldn't kill him, because he didn't die on the cross, and he didn't suffer on the cross because the centurion put him out of his misery.
I think he would have suffered.
Suffered a bit, but how long was he up there before the centurion put him out of his misery?
We see movies where people are tied to the cross, and that never happened. Nails were put in through your wrist. It wasn't through your palms of your hands as people thought. It was actually through the wrist, and the nails were shaped such that they twisted the tendons so that your own fist closed up over the nail to prevent it from being removed. It was a horrible thing to happen. Incredibly painful.
When they examined the Turin shroud, that's when they learned that actually, you don't crucify someone by putting a nail through their hand, because it will just rip and it will come out between the fingers. You have to put it in, behind the wrist bone.
Well, that's it, and there are a number of reasons why that happens. So the nails themselves are sort of wide, up close to the head of the nail, to deliberately twist the tendon.
But I mean, he was also tied, wasn't he? He was also had ropes around him. He was tied to the cross.
I would imagine that as well, but certainly it wouldn't have been a very pleasant experience. I think it's safe to say we're making the assumption now that Jesus was a real person. But I'll say anybody who was crucified, as indeed a lot of people were, they would have suffered. Definitely would have suffered.
Unless someone for the time that they stayed alive, if they're lucky, someone puts them out of their misery. But I can imagine the nails going to the wrist. That must hurt like hell. But nothing compared to the nail going through the top of your foot. I bet that's a real bloody killer.
Don't really want to think about it. And it's Christmas.
So let's not
dwell.
This is an Easter time story. Really, we're getting into.
Yeah.
But it's quite possible that he didn't die on the cross, or that he died, but not in the sense that we understand, that he's capable of self-resurrection.
Indeed. And let's move on then to the ascension 40 days later. So the ascension itself, we are taught, in full view of everyone, Jesus rose up into the sky. A cloud hid him from sight. 2 angels appeared before the disciples and said, basically, he's gone back to heaven. He'll come back the way that you have just seen him leave.
Didn't Mary also get taken up body and soul?
I'm going to be honest, I don't know.
I think she did. I mean, it's pure Star Trek, that one.
But so Jesus rose up into the air again. Was this with the aid of some sort of craft? Was the cloud that obscured him from view a UFO? Well, it was a UFO. We don't know what it was. It was flying, so in the truest sense of the word, we know it's UFO. But was it some sort of extraplanetary craft that took him away? Was he being returned to his planet?
Yeah. But
that's
and it's also an Easter story.
It's also an Easter story, but we're talking about Jesus as a whole here. So yeah, that's where we are with it. So it's time for our customary summary. So Neil, Jesus, was he an extraterrestrial?
I still stick with my view that Jesus was more an idea than a single person. He was a collection of stories. He was a collection of folk tales, parables, moral tales.
Okay, but could those stories could those stories have been influenced by otherworldly visitors?
And those stories seem to have been influenced by certainly things they didn't understand, but yeah, which fit the criteria for extraterrestrial activity from 2,000 years ago.
So you think there might be something in this theory then?
There's something in those stories, but of course they're only stories. They're not reliable histories. They're not documented histories. They're not. You can, that's not what they're there for. They're there to tell you a tale.
Okay. I'm of the. I can definitely see where you're coming from, and I don't disagree. But I do think there's something more to it. As I say, I come from the view that there was a person, and if that was the case, then yeah, if those stories happen today, this is definitely how we would interpret them as extraterrestrial. In fact, it's been said that ufology is perhaps a new version of religion. It's certainly how we would interpret the same things.
It certainly has many of the traits, but certainly if a young woman or an older woman came up to me and told me that she was a virgin, well, I wouldn't believe that for a start, but if she told me she was a virgin and she was pregnant, I'd say, yeah, no way. And I think I challenge, most Christians out there would think the same. They'd think, no, this is someone with mental health issues or some need to deny, or she's got herself into trouble somehow. Here's
the thing: there are such stories in ufology.
Yeah, and also, if someone came up to me and said, "I'm the Son of God," I wouldn't believe him, and I imagine most people out there wouldn't believe anyone who came up to them and said, "I'm the Son of God," and God told me to tell you to do this. You'd be saying, well, sorry, what were God's exact words? What did?
Indeed. So I'm. It sounds like we're both pretty much on the fence, although perhaps I'm leaning rather more towards this being an extraterrestrial. One thing I think we can agree on is that the idea of a Jesus person, as long as it brings people peace and love and harmony in their lives, I think it's safe to believe whatever you want, don't you?
I think so. I think actually what is compelling, now that I think about it, just out off the top of my head, is that kind of these are stories of extraterrestrial events told by people who would have had no concept of extraterrestrials, which gives a kind of veracity to them.
There we go.
No, I'm good.
Okay. But, as ever, I'm going to ask the question, what do you think, listeners? Have we got it all wrong? Is it, are you a true believer? Are you a true Christian and do not believe in extraterrestrial intervention with these matters? Are we absolutely bang on the money? And yes, Jesus was an ET here for the betterment of mankind. Do write in, tell us what you think. The usual places, Twitter and Facebook, we're on. You can find all the details at aliensexplored.com. Don't forget to join us next year. I've been waiting for ages to say that. When we'll be discussing a very interesting development where the former head of Israel's space program has come forward and said that aliens are absolutely real. We'll be discussing that one in some depth. So that's one to look forward to for next year, isn't it, Neil?
I'm already looking forward to it.
Indeed.
It's given me something to live for.
In the meantime, keep watching those mince pies and scones.
And have a cool Yule, peace and love and goodwill to all of you.
Indeed. It's happy holidays from me.
And Merry Christmas from me.
And take care, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
See you next year. Bye.
Bye.
Aliens Explored is a Feagle Films production in association with Juicy Falls. Music by Darren Mafucci and editing by Stu Jackson. Find us on Twitter and Facebook by searching Aliens Explored or visit aliensexplored.com.